You ever have one of those moments where everything just clicks? Not in a good way. Not like the end of a romantic comedy when the guy suddenly realizes he's been in love with the girl next door the whole time. No, I mean the kind of click that sounds like a door locking from the outside. That was me, sitting across from my wife of 10 years, hearing her say something that should have been harmless, but it shattered something in me. Catherine and I had been married almost a decade. We had the house, two beautiful kids, Emma and Jake, and on paper, it looked like we were the perfect family. But that night, everything changed. It was a regular Tuesday evening. The kids were already in bed, and we were cleaning up after dinner. I made a comment about how we hadn't really connected in a while, how I missed us. And she looked at me, not angry, not sad, just blank, and said, "Closeness is optional." She said it like she was talking about dessert, like it was some casual, philosophical truth she'd picked up from podcast. But to me, it felt like a punch to the gut. Optional? How the hell was that optional in a marriage? In our marriage? I couldn't even respond right away. I just stared at her, waiting for a smirk, a wink, something to tell me she didn't mean it. But she wasn't joking. She rinsed a plate, dried her hands, and walked past me like she hadn't just pulled the rug out from under our entire relationship. And that was it. That was the moment. I didn't even know it fully at the time, but that was when the fight in me died. Not out of anger, not even out of heartbreak, just exhaustion. I had spent so long trying to make things better, to fix the distance growing between us, to get us back to where we used to be. But hearing her say that, it was like she'd finally given me permission to stop trying. I went to bed that night, staring at the ceiling, not angry, just hollow. I didn't touch her, didn't try to talk. She didn't either. She turned off her lamp, rolled over, and fell asleep like everything was normal. And maybe for her it was, but for me, everything had just shifted. The next morning, I didn't bring it up. I didn't replay the conversation or to try to clarify. I didn't push or beg or plead for closeness. I just stopped. Stopped waiting for the version of Catherine who used to light up when I walked into a room. Stopped chasing a connection that clearly meant more to me than it did to her. I got the kids ready for school, kissed them on their foreheads, packed Emma's lunch, made sure Jake didn't forget his backpack. Catherine sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like I wasn't even there. Like we weren't there. And weirdly, I felt calm. Not at peace, but free. Free from the weight of carrying a relationship by myself. Free from hoping she'd notice how hard I was trying. Free from pretending everything was fine when every part of me knew it wasn't. That day at work, I didn't vent to anyone. I didn't even think about calling my best friend to unload, which I usually did. Instead, I pulled into the parking lot, turned off the engine, and sat there for a few minutes just breathing. For the first time in forever, I felt like I wasn't failing at something. I wasn't failing to fix my marriage. I was just stepping out of the ring. The thing is, people always talk about the big betrayals in relationships, cheating, lying, screaming matches. But no one talks about the quiet betrayal. The kind where someone just slowly stops caring, and you keep loving them anyway, thinking if you love hard enough, they'll come back. That was me. Loving hard, hoping harder. And for what? Closeness was optional. That sentence replayed in my head for days. I'd hear it while folding laundry, while sitting in traffic, while watching Jake's soccer game. I'd glance at Catherine across the field, clapping half-heartedly, and I'd think, this is what we've become. Two people orbiting the same house, raising the same kids, but living completely separate lives. And the saddest part? I couldn't even be mad at her anymore. She'd been honest. Maybe not in the way I wanted her to be, but in her own way, she told me the truth. She didn't need the same connection I was craving. She was content with this. The silence, the routine, the lack of intimacy, the absence of us. So I made a choice. I didn't slam any doors, didn't throw accusations. I just started living like she did. Detached, polite, functional. I became a ghost in my own marriage. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I needed to survive. And that's when things started to shift. Not overnight, not dramatically, but enough for her to notice. The irony? When I finally stopped reaching for her, she started to feel the distance. It's strange how fast the dynamic changes when you stop trying. I used to be the one initiating everything. Conversations, plans, even those little moments of touch, like reaching for her hand during a movie or brushing her hair back from her face. They had become rituals I clung to, hoping they'd spark something familiar in her. But after that night, closeness is optional. I couldn't keep doing it. I didn't announce the shift. I didn't sit her down and say, "Hey, I'm done trying." I just started mirroring her energy. I answered her questions with the same casual tone she'd used for months. I stopped offering up details about my day or asking about hers. I stopped waiting for her at night and went to bed when I was tired. No goodnight kisses, no lingering conversations. Just silence. And to my surprise, she noticed. Not right away. At first, I think she was relieved. Maybe even enjoyed the quiet. But after a few days, the questions started. Little things. Everything okay? Is something wrong? You seem off lately. I just smile and say, I'm fine. And I was. Or at least I was learning to be. There was a time when I would have jumped at that moment. Her noticing, her asking, to crack open the door and pour everything out. But now I saw it differently. She wasn't asking because she was concerned about us. She was asking because something was different, and people get uncomfortable when the things they take for granted start to shift. And that's what I realized. I had become a fixture in her life. Reliable. Predictable. The guy who filled the gaps and kept the wheels turning. The guy who stayed up late helping Emma with her school project while Catherine scrolled Instagram in bed. The guy who made sure Jake brushed his teeth, packed his lunch, and had clean cleats before every game. The guy who remembered anniversaries, paid bills on time, and planned the occasional weekend getaway that she always seemed too tired to enjoy. I was the one holding it all together. And I don't say that to sound self-righteous. It's just the truth. Somewhere along the way, Catherine had stopped showing up emotionally. And for the longest time, I didn't want to see it. I just kept doing more, trying harder, thinking that maybe if I carried enough weight, she'd eventually meet me halfway. But the truth hit hard that night in the kitchen. She didn't want to meet me halfway. She wanted to coast. And I let her. So I stopped. And for the first time in what felt like years, I started focusing on myself. It was awkward at first. Self-care wasn't exactly something I prioritized in a long time. But I started with the little things. I dusted off my old guitar, the one I hadn't touched since Jake was born. My fingers were clumsy on the strings, but the sound still felt like home. I started running again, just a mile or two in the evenings, but enough to remind myself I still had a pulse. I stopped asking Catherine where she was going when she left the house. I stopped waiting up for her. When she got home late from dinner with friends, I didn't ask questions. I just nodded, said cool, and went back to whatever I was doing. It wasn't about being passive-aggressive. I genuinely didn't care anymore. I had been begging for closeness, and she'd made it clear she didn't value it. So why should I? Funny thing is, the less I cared, the more curious she got. One night, I was sitting on the porch, just strumming the guitar under the warm glow of the porch light. It was quiet. Emma and Jake were already asleep, and I'd poured myself a glass of bourbon. The sky was clear, and for once, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Catherine came out, wrapped in a light cardigan, her arms crossed. She stood there for a minute, watching me. I didn't know you still played, she said softly. I shrugged. Used to. Just getting back into it. She nodded, like she wanted to say more, but she didn't. After a moment, she went back inside. I didn't follow. In the past, I would have taken that moment and run with it. Maybe invited her to sit with me, asked about her day, tried to create some connection. But I didn't. Because for once, I wasn't trying to make her comfortable. I wasn't trying to fill the silence, or ease her guilt, or pretend things were fine. She had shown me who she was. And now, I was just matching the energy. There was something incredibly freeing about that. About no longer being the emotional janitor in our marriage. Always cleaning up the messes. Always trying to hold things together with duct tape and hope. I've been afraid for so long that if I stopped trying, everything would fall apart. But the truth? It already had. I was just finally acknowledging it. I didn't plan for it to go this way. I never pictured myself waking up one morning and realizing I was done trying. But that's exactly what happened. No dramatic fight. No threats. No tearful ultimatums. Just this quiet, final click inside me. Something had settled. And once it did, there was no going back. I woke up before the alarm, as usual. Made coffee. packed the kids' lunches, folded laundry that had been sitting in the dryer for 2 days because Catherine had forgotten, all the routine stuff that had long since stopped feeling shared. But this time, I didn't do any of it out of obligation. I wasn't trying to keep the peace or prove my worth anymore. I was doing it because the kids deserve consistency, even if their parents were slowly turning into strangers under the same roof. When Catherine came down that morning, her hair still damp from the shower, I didn't look up from the counter. She poured her coffee, glanced around like she wanted to say something, then took her mug and disappeared into the other room. And I felt nothing. That scared me a little, if I'm being honest, because I remembered a time, not even that long ago, when just a distant look from her would eat away at me for days. When her silence felt like a punishment, and I'd spend all night wondering what I did wrong. But now, her distance didn't hurt anymore. It just was. That's when I knew I had truly started to let go. There was no big announcement. I didn't sit her down and say, "I'm leaving." I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. I was still processing. But emotionally, mentally, I was already miles down the road. I started moving differently. Subtle things at first. I stopped looping her into every little decision. What to make for dinner, which movie to watch with the kids, whether we should RSVP to that neighborhood barbecue. If she asked, I'd give a short answer. If she didn't, I didn't offer. She could either engage or stay in her own bubble. I was done chasing her out of it. At night, I slept on the far edge of the bed. She didn't seem to mind or even notice. Her back was always to me anyway. We'd become two people sleepwalking through a life that looked picture perfect from the outside. But inside, the foundation had rotted out a long time ago. I started saying yes to more things. Drinks after work with coworkers, Sunday morning runs, even a weekend hike with an old friend I hadn't seen in years. Catherine didn't ask where I was going or when I'd be back, and I didn't offer it up. The less we talked, the less there was to say. One night, about a week after things started shifting, she asked if I wanted to watch something with her. Some show we used to binge together before everything got messy. I paused, genuinely surprised. "Nah," I said, not unkindly. "I'm heading out for a run." She blinked. "At night?" "Yeah," I said, slipping on my shoes. "It's quiet. Peaceful." She didn't argue, just nodded and went back to scrolling her phone. And that was that. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some sign that she cared, that she was at least confused by the change in me. But she didn't press. And that silence, that absence of resistance, that told me everything I needed to know. We weren't a couple anymore. We were cohabitants, co-parents, co-somethings. But the us we used to be, that had faded into something neither of us seemed willing or able to revive. At one point, I caught myself wondering what she was thinking, whether she noticed the difference, whether it registered that the man who used to hang on to her every word, who used to plan little surprise dates just to make her smile, had stopped reaching for her completely. But then I let that thought go too, because it didn't matter. I wasn't trying to win her back. I wasn't trying to prove a point. I was reclaiming myself. Letting go wasn't a single moment. It was a series of tiny choices. Saying less, expecting nothing, redirecting my energy inward instead of spilling it out for someone who no longer caught it. I started sleeping better, waking up lighter, not because everything was okay, but because I was no longer carrying something that wasn't mine to hold. And maybe that's what real freedom feels like. I used to think letting go would feel like failure, like walking away from the life we built meant I hadn't tried hard enough, hadn't loved deeply enough. But the truth is, letting go didn't feel like failure at all. It felt like relief. I stopped measuring my days by Catherine's moods, stopped waiting for her to notice I'd done the dishes, or that I'd taken Jake to the dentist she forgot to schedule. I didn't point it out. I didn't expect a thank you. I just did it and moved on, because I wasn't doing these things for her anymore. I was doing them for me, for our kids, and for the version of myself that I was trying to find again. And yeah, I'll admit it, there were moments where I'd catch her watching me, not with affection, but with something closer to confusion. Like she didn't recognize me anymore. Like she was starting to realize the quiet, reliable man she had grown used to was no longer orbiting around her. I didn't react. One night, I was in the living room playing guitar, something I'd stopped doing years ago when life got too busy. The kids were already in bed, and the house was still except for the soft strumming. Catherine walked in, stood in the doorway for a second. "You sound good," she said. "Thanks," I replied without looking up. I didn't stop playing. Didn't invite her to sit down. I wasn't being cold. I was just done trying to pull her back into something she didn't want to be in. She hovered there for a few more seconds before walking away. I finished the song, set the guitar down, and for the first time in a long while, felt completely fine being alone in that room. It's amazing what happens when you stop anchoring your worth to someone else's attention. I started running again, almost every day, not just around the block. Either I was pushing myself. 5 miles, then 6, clearing my head with every step. It was like peeling off layers of resentment and guilt and expectation until all that was left was me. Just me, sweating it out in the cold morning air, earbuds in, lungs burning, and alive. I even met up with some old friends I hadn't seen in years. Guys I'd pushed aside because weekends were always family time and Catherine didn't like when I was gone too long. But now, I had time. Or maybe I was just choosing to spend it differently. They welcomed me back without judgment. A couple of them had gone through divorces. One said, "You look different, man. Lighter." That hit me harder than I expected. Back home, things were still quiet. Catherine hadn't tried to talk about the shift. Not directly, but I could tell she felt it. She started asking more questions. Little things like, "Where are you headed?" Or, "Wanting to pick anything up at the store?" But there was a hesitation in her voice, like she knew something had changed but couldn't name it. And I gave her nothing to grab onto. I wasn't being cruel. I was just done offering explanations for the sake of making her comfortable. One night, out of nowhere, she said, "You've been different lately." I looked up from my laptop. Yeah, she said, like she was testing the waters. I don't know, distant. I didn't argue. I didn't deny it. Instead, I just said, "I guess I just stopped fighting for something that only I seemed to care about." She didn't know how to respond. She opened her mouth like she wanted to challenge me, then closed it again. And that silence? That was louder than anything she could have said. Because for the first time, she realized I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't sulking or playing games. I had actually pulled away. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. After the kids went to bed, I sat outside with a drink, listening to the quiet. No TV, no music, just the soft hum of the night and the sound of my own breathing. I thought I'd feel lonely in moments like that. But I didn't. Not anymore. Because I wasn't waiting for Catherine to come find me. I wasn't waiting for some grand apology or for her to finally realize what she had. I wasn't waiting at all. That's what freedom looked like. It wasn't loud or rebellious. It was subtle, peaceful, a decision made quietly over time until it became a new way of living. The next morning, Catherine asked if I wanted to take the kids to the park together. It was a Saturday. Normally, I'd jump at the chance. But this time I said, "Actually, I got plans." She blinked, surprised. "Oh, with who?" "Just meeting a friend for a hike," I said simply. And that was that. No explanations. No justification. No guilt. She nodded, and I saw it, just for a second, the flicker of something in her eyes. Realization. Maybe regret. I don't know. But I didn't lean into it. I didn't give her a way back in. Because this new version of me, he didn't live in her shadow anymore. I used to imagine the end of marriage as this loud, messy, dramatic thing. Shouting matches, slammed doors, someone throwing a suitcase down the stairs. But when it finally came for us, it didn't look anything like that. It looked like a Saturday morning. The kids were with my parents for the weekend. The house was quiet. Catherine was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee. I walked in, poured myself a cup, and sat down across from her. She looked up at me and said, "Is this it?" I didn't play dumb. I didn't ask what she meant. "Yeah," I said. "I think it is." She nodded slowly, like she'd been rehearsing for this moment and still didn't feel ready. Her fingers traced the rim of her mug. "I didn't think you'd really walk away. I didn't think you'd let me." That hung in the air between us for a long time. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired sleep could fix, but the kind that sits in your bones when you've been pretending for too long. And I realized then, she had probably been just as lost as I was. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not at the same pace, but still lost. "I didn't know how bad it had gotten," she said finally. "I did," I replied. I lived it every day. There was no anger in my voice, just truth. And maybe that's what made it hit harder than if I'd yelled. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was just done. I didn't mean for it to be like this, she whispered. Neither did I. Another long pause. What do we tell the kids, she asked. That we love them. That we'll always be their parents. That nothing changes that. She nodded again, but her eyes welled up. And for the first time in a long time, I believed those tears were real. Not manipulative. Not performative. Just real. But even so, that didn't change anything. I wasn't looking for tears. I wasn't looking for closure in some grand confession. I'd already found mine in the silence, in the months of slow withdrawal, in the stillness that came when I finally stopped needing her to feel whole. I want you to be happy, I said, even if it's not with me. I don't know how to be, she admitted. Then maybe this is how we figured out apart. We didn't hug. We didn't hold hands. We just sat there, sipping our coffee like two people acknowledging the end of something sacred. And strangely, it was peaceful. Over the next few days, we started the logistical stuff, talking about the house, the schedule for Emma and Jake, a joint statement for our families. Catherine cried more than I expected. She apologized often. I nodded, but I didn't reach across the table to comfort her. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I didn't want to blur the lines. That chapter was closed. I signed the papers first, left them on the table with a pen. I don't know when she signed them, but by the next morning, they were gone from the kitchen. Just like that, we were no longer husband and wife. And still, there was no yelling, no pleading, no replays of what went wrong. Just this quiet understanding that sometimes love doesn't end with a bang. It just erodes, slowly, until all you're left with is memory and 1,000 little cracks no one ever patched. A few weeks later, I moved into a smaller place not far from the kids' school. Simple, clean, mine. The first night I slept there, alone, I thought I'd feel grief, maybe even panic. But instead, I felt calm. I lay on the floor of the living room. No furniture yet, just a mattress and my guitar, and I listened to the rain tapping the windows like a soft reset. There was pain, sure, but it wasn't overwhelming. It was honest. It was mine. I still see Catherine, of course, at school drop-offs, soccer games, parent-teacher nights. We're kind to each other, polite, sometimes even friendly. But there's a wall now. I don't plan to climb back over. The kids are adjusting. They ask questions, and I answer them with care. I make sure they know they're loved, that this wasn't about them, that their mom and I just needed different things. As for me, I'm figuring it out. I've started writing again, running more, taking photos, relearning who I am when I'm not trying to hold a marriage together with duct tape and hope. It's not easy, but it's real. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. People think the hardest part of walking away is the decision itself. But it's not. The hardest part is realizing you waited so long for someone else to choose you, when you should have chosen yourself a long time ago. Well, I finally did, and I'm not looking back.